Martin stood on the platform, staring at the flickering lights overhead. It was a cold, foggy night, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you feel like the world is fading. He checked his watch. The last train was late. In the distance, he could barely make out the soft rumble of an approaching locomotive, a sound that seemed to resonate deep within his soul. He wasn't quite sure why he was here. After all, his life had settled into a monotonous routine, a job he tolerated, a marriage he wasn't sure he was fully committed to, and a nagging feeling that somewhere along the way, he had missed the train to his real life. Tonight, he felt as if he was running away from something, though he couldn't quite place what. At long last, the train arrived. It rolled into the station slowly, like a shadow creeping over the landscape, its metal wheels screeching against the tracks. The doors slid open with a mechanical hiss, and Martin hesitated before stepping inside. The carriage was nearly empty, save for a few figures seated in the dim light. The atmosphere was eerie, yet he felt an inexplicable pull to sit down and stay. Martin chose a seat near the window, but as the train lurched forward, his gaze drifted to the passengers. There were 5 of them, each sitting quietly, lost in thought, or perhaps something darker. The train rattled along the tracks, passing through foggy countryside, and with each passing minute, the air seemed to grow colder, heavier. He turned to the first passenger, a gaunt man with hollow eyes and a weary expression. "Strange night," Martin ventured, trying to break the silence. The man looked up slowly, as if emerging from a deep reverie. "You could say that," he murmured. "But every night is strange for those of us on this train." "What do you mean?" Martin asked, perplexed. The man sighed, his breath visible in the cold air. "We're not here by choice. None of us are. This train, it's not for the living." Martin felt a chill run down his spine. "What are you talking about?" The man fixed him with a haunting gaze. "This is the last train, the one that leads to the end of the line. We're already dead, you see, and we're just waiting for our stories to finish." Martin's heart pounded in his chest. Dead? What kind of madness was this? He glanced around the carriage. The other passengers seemed oddly still, their faces pale and worn, as if they had long since given up hope. "Do you believe in ghosts?" the man asked suddenly. Martin shook his head, half in disbelief, half in fear. "No, I mean, I've never thought about it." The man let out a low chuckle, though there was no humor in it. "I didn't either, until I became one." Martin shifted uncomfortably in his seat, trying to make sense of what the man had said. How did you end up here?" The man leaned back, his hollow eyes reflecting the dim light. "I was a husband once, like you. I had a life, a wife, and I thought everything was fine. But sometimes, you take too many wrong turns, and before you know it, you're lost. I couldn't find my way back, to her, or to myself. And then, one day, it was too late." Martin swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Too late?" the man nodded. "You don't realize how easy it is to slip away from the ones you love. I never knew I'd boarded the last train until it was too late to get off." Before Martin could respond, the train rattled into a tunnel, the world outside disappearing into blackness. He glanced at the next passenger, a woman in her early 30s, her hands nervously fidgeting with a piece of fabric. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and regret. "I ran away," she whispered, almost to herself. "From everything. From my life, my responsibilities, my family. I thought it would be easier, you know? To leave it all behind. But running only leads you to one place." Here, Martin could feel his heartbeat quicken. He wanted to argue, to deny what they were saying, but there was something about their words that tugged at his soul, something that made him question his own life. Was he running too? Had he boarded the wrong train, not realizing it until now? The next passenger, an older man with a cane, spoke up. "It's not about where you're going. It's about what you're leaving behind. The last train is always there for those who forget that." Martin's hands trembled. He looked at the 4th passenger, a young woman, barely in her 20s. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with sorrow. She didn't speak, but she held up a photograph, an image of a family. Her family. She, too, had left them behind, only to end up here. Finally, Martin turned to the fifth and final passenger, a tall man in a dark coat who had remained silent until now. His face was hard, and his voice, when he spoke, was as cold as the night. Commitment isn't something you lose all at once. It slips away, bit by bit, while you're looking in the other direction. Martin swallowed, feeling the weight of the man's words pressing down on him. He had always thought he was committed to his wife, to their life together. But was he really? Or had he, like these ghosts, been slipping away without realizing it? Suddenly, the train came to an abrupt halt. Martin looked around in confusion, but the passengers remained still, their faces unchanged. The doors opened, and a heavy mist rolled into the carriage. He could see nothing beyond the platform, only darkness. "This is your stop," the first man said quietly. Martin stood, unsure of what to do. "But, where am I?" the man smiled faintly. "That's for you to decide." Martin hesitated, then stepped out of the train, into the thick fog. As he did, the train doors closed behind him, and with a shudder, the train vanished into the mist. He was alone, standing in the cold, silent night. And then, he woke up. The bed was warm, his wife sleeping peacefully beside him. The early morning light filtered through the curtains, and for a moment, Martin felt disoriented. The train, the ghosts, was it all a dream? He looked at his wife, her face calm and serene, and he felt an overwhelming sense of clarity. The question that had haunted him on the train remained: was he truly committed to her? He didn't know the answer yet, but what he did know was that he had been given another chance. He wasn't on the last train, at least, not yet. With a deep breath, Martin pulled his wife closer, vowing that when the time came, he would be sure. He would not let his life slip away without knowing where he was headed. And he would make sure that when he boarded the last train, it wouldn't be a ride filled with regrets.